If you've been following ICE stories lately, you'll recognize that the agency is acting outside of the law. But even their excuses for misconduct fall flat the moment that they're examined. This week alone, ICE claimed that a man fractured his skull by running into a wall while handcuffed. The DOJ tried to claim that Venezuelan migrants were gang affiliated, but immediately lost that battle in court. And Trump's DOJ even considered sending a 5-year-old back into ICE detention. None of these are isolated incidents. These are all examples of the exact same playbook of an agency that is acting outside of their authority with zero accountability. My name is Mason, a progressive live streamer known as One Hand Politics, and I've partnered with Courier to bring the most important news of the day. Let's start in Minnesota, where I've seen one of the most ridiculous claims come from ICE. ICE claims that a man shattered his skull running into a wall, which triggers tension at a Minnesota hospital. Intensive care nurses immediately doubted the word of federal immigration officers when they arrived at a Minneapolis hospital with a Mexican immigrant who had broken bones in his face and skull. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents initially claimed Alberto Castaneda Mondragon had tried to flee while handcuffed and purposely ran headfirst into a brick wall, according to court documents filed by a lawyer seeking his release. But staff members at Hennepin County Medical Center determined that could not possibly account for the fractures and bleeding throughout the 31-year-old's brain, said three nurses familiar with the case. It was laughable if there's something to laugh about, said one of the nurses, who spoke to the Associated Press on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss patient care. There was no way this person ran headfirst into a wall. The explanation from ICE is an example of recent run ins between immigration officers and healthcare workers that have contributed to mounting friction at Minneapolis hospitals. Workers at Hennepin County facility say ICE officers have restrained patients in defiance of hospital rules and stayed at their sides for days. The agents have also lingered around the campus and pressed people for proof of citizenship. Proof of citizenship inside of a hospital. There has to be boundaries that we have. Personally, I think that ICE needs to be out of there completely. But you need to have limits when it comes to things like courthouses, hospitals, places where people should not be afraid to go. No migrant should be afraid of getting medical care if they need it, either for preventative care or life threatening scenarios. And the same thing with a courthouse. If you are actively pursuing to detain people at a courthouse, you don't care about the legal processes. People are going to courthouses to go through their asylum case or get proper paperwork to establish their legality here. But you cannot have immigration officers there because that disincentivizes people to go through it the legal way. None of it makes sense. Since the start of Operation Metro Surge, President Trump's immigration crackdowns in Minnesota, ICE officers have become such a fixture at the hospital that administrators issued new protocols for how employees should engage with them. Some employees complain that they have been intimidated to the point that they avoid crossing paths with agents while at work and use encrypted communications to guard against any electronic eavesdropping. Similar operations have been carried out by federal agents in Los Angeles, Chicago, and other cities where opponents have criticized that they say are overly aggressive tactics. It's not clear how many people have required hospital care while in detention. Injuries appeared inconsistent with ICE's account. The AP interviewed a doctor and 5 nurses who work at Hennepin County Medical Care or Medical Center who spoke on condition of anonymity to talk about Castaneda Madron's case and conditions inside the hospital. The AP also consulted with an outside physician who affirmed his injuries were inconsistent with an accidental fall or running into a wall. About 4 hours after his arrest, he was taken to a hospital emergency room in suburban Edina with swelling and bruising around his right eye and bleeding. A CT scan revealed at least 8 skull fractures and life threatening hemorrhages in at least 5 areas of his brain, according to court documents. He was then transferred to Hennepin County Medical Center. I'm pretty sure a person could not get these kinds of intensive injuries from running into a wall, Thomas said, adding that she would need to see the CT scans to make a more definitive finding. I almost think one doesn't have to be a physician to conclude that a person can't get skull fractures on both the right and left sides of their head and from front to back by running themselves into a wall, she said. Life threatening brain hemorrhaging. This is all coming from physicians. This is not a coordinated democratic attack. These are licensed physicians that are saying this is inconsistent with the account of the federal government. Who else are we to believe but those that are trained to help people? In a different case, the Department of Homeland Security claimed in Portland that 2 Venezuelan migrants had gang affiliations and posed violent threats to the agents, which they used to justify lethal force in court. All of that fell flat. Judges found zero evidence of gang ties. The FBI affidavits contradicted the DHS's talking points, and attorneys described it as a smear campaign used to justify force after the fact. This article from The Guardian reveals more details on the case. Court records obtained by The Guardian reveal a Department of Justice prosecutor later directly contradicted DHS's Trende Aragua statements in court, telling a judge, "We're not suggesting that Nino Moncada is a gang member." An FBI affidavit issued following the incident also suggests that in a previous shooting cited by DHS, Zambrano Contreras was not a suspect, but rather a reported victim of sexual assault and robbery. Neither Nino or Zambrano have prior criminal convictions, their lawyers have said. So these are not people with criminal convictions. These are people that DHS claimed as such after using violent force. Are you seeing the pattern emerge yet? Perhaps one of the most difficult ones to hear is Trump's DOJ is considering sending a 5-year-old back into ICE detention even after the family's already been released. Many Democrat politicians have used Liam Conejo Ramos' story in order to show the abuse of these ICE raids in many different communities across the country. They're detaining 5-year-olds. They used Liam as bait to lure his parents out of their home. It is a wild story, but Trump's DOJ may send 5-year-old back to ICE detention. The move comes as figures show the number of children in ICE detention has jumped more than sixfold since Trump's return. The Department of Justice has signaled that it will likely appeal a decision that forced ICE to release a 5-year-old boy from detention. Liam Conejo Ramos became the face of President Donald Trump's mass deportation strategy this month after a photo of him went viral, showing him standing in the snow in a blue bunny ears hat as ICE seized his father in Minnesota. Liam and his father, Adrian Conejo Arias, were detained by immigration officers and held at an ICE facility in Texas until U.S. District Judge Fred Beery ordered their release this weekend. Liam is now home with his hat and his backpack. Thank you to everyone who demanded freedom for Liam. Joaquin Castro, a San Antonio Democrat, said in a post on X, "We won't stop until all children and families are home." But whether Liam remains at home is now an open question after Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche signaled that the department may appeal the judge's ruling. In an interview with ABC over the weekend, Liam's father, Conejo Arias, outlined the troubling conditions they faced in detention, which was hit by a measles outbreak on Sunday. Inside, Liam became feverish, vomited, and grew lethargic. His father said the conditions were not great and alleged staff had no medicine for his son. "We asked for medication, but we were told they didn't have any," he said. This is unacceptable. I feel like I say this every week, and it gets tiresome seeing consistent patterns among Department of Homeland Security and the way that they treat people in detention. We need to have a more robust system that protects people from this abuse. This is also consistent with Trump's typical response to human rights abuses. When he is properly called out for injustices, like a 5-year-old getting detained, used as bait for his father, and given no medical access, he doubles down. Trump, in his mind, can do no wrong. Not only can he do no wrong, but every action that he does is justified and should be done. And it's for national security. So he will continue to justify that, double down, make it seem as though he can do no mistake. We know Trump's responses when it comes to call outs on these clear injustices, but what is the DHS adapting in their policy? A new bombshell from Common Dreams shows that leaked DHS memo reveals ICE claiming expansive new warrantless arrest powers. This memo bends over backwards to say that ICE agents have nothing but green lights to make an arrest without even a supervisor's approval, said one former ICE official. An internal legal memo obtained by the New York Times reveals that federal immigration enforcement agents are claiming broad new powers to carry out warrantless arrests. The Times reported on Friday that the memo, which was signed by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Acting Director Todd Lyons, explains the ability of lower level ICE agents to carry out sweeps, rounding up people they encounter and suspect are undocumented immigrants, rather than targeted enforcement operations in which they set out, warrant in hand, to arrest a specific person. In the past, agents have been granted the power to carry out warrantless arrests only in situations where they believed a suspected undocumented immigrant is a flight risk who is unlikely to comply with obligations, such as appearing at court hearings. However, the memo declares this standard to be unreasoned and incorrect, saying that agents should feel free to carry out arrests so long as the suspect is unlikely to be located at the scene of the encounter or another clearly identifiable location once an administrative warrant is obtained. This completely spits in the face of the Fourth Amendment. We have a right to protect ourselves from unlawful search and seizure, and we cannot just have our privacy invaded by federal officials who don't have probable cause. Stanford University political science Tom Clark questioned the validity of the memo, which appears to directly conflict with the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which requires search warrants as a protection against unreasonable search and seizures. So here's how the law works, he wrote. People on whom it imposes constraints don't just get to write themselves a memo saying they don't have to follow the law. Maybe I'll write myself a memo saying I don't have to pay my taxes this year. The Bill of Rights was made for just this moment. We have a right to protect ourselves from an unruly, tyrannical federal government that is trying to impose its authority on our civil rights. An unfounded belief that federal agents can act with complete authority and zero accountability is the reason why we're seeing such confidence and recklessness on the ground. In Minneapolis, Chicago, Los Angeles, you name it, ICE agents are acting as if they have supreme authority, no accountability, and no checks and balances. DHS's attempt to build trust back in the American people is sending in more troops with body cameras. This article from Common Dreams says surveillance is not accountability. Gnome sending DHS agents in Minnesota body cameras. This is not going to help the issue. We have every possible angle of the murder of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and DHS still lied about the overall narrative. What is body cameras going to do here? This is not going to stop abuse. The only thing that stops abuse is actual oversight, partnering with state and local officials in these investigations of the federal government. We can't allow the federal government to investigate itself and expect the truth to come out. That is like asking a serial killer to investigate his own crimes. Are we really going to trust Ted Bundy to be the one to uncover Ted Bundy's crimes? That's exactly what we're seeing here. DHS simultaneously tried to block Democratic leadership from inspecting ICE facilities. Ilhan Omar was barred from viewing detention centers. We know in New Jersey, LaMonica McIver was faced with federal charges for trying to do her job and make sure constituents are being properly treated in detention centers. None of this screams transparency or taking accountability or taking responsibility for misconduct. All of this does is continue to say that ICE agents are acting totally fine. We'll send them with body cameras. You'll see that they're acting fine. We're already seeing that from legal observers. What's going to change with a camera on someone's person and somebody filming on their phone as they are in Minnesota and several other places across the country? All of these incidents have the exact same pattern. Federal agents use force on American residents. They release a convenient narrative or explanation on why that force needed to be used, which often includes victim blaming. Then they reject any oversight from state and local law enforcement and only adjust their story if their narrative completely falls flat. Regardless of the story that we're seeing here, it's all the same pattern. This is not about a few bad actors. It's not just a couple ICE agents that are acting without conduct. This is about a system that explicitly rejects any accountability or cooperation with other agencies and expects not to be questioned in that narrative. Every single time that they are questioned, though, the story changes. And that tells you everything about the way that they are lying to your face. Regardless of the story, all of this represents a similar pattern. DHS and federal government uses force against American residents. They come up with a convenient story on why that force needed to be used, which often includes blaming the victim. They reject any oversight or cooperation with other agencies and only investigate their own crimes. And their stories immediately change the moment that their fake narrative is revealed to the American public. This is not accountability. This is an agency that is acting unchecked and expecting zero questioning from the public. And every time they are questioned, the story changes. That should tell you how little they view the American people.